you are saying everyone has it, but you yourself don't have a portfolio. You know what I mean? And you would think everybody else has a portfolio, but actually you're wrong, right? Because it's like you don't have a portfolio and a lot of people don't, right? And we know we should, but doesn't mean people are doing it. I just want to dispel the notion that you need a master's for data science, for example. There are plenty of people in the US with just an undergrad degree doing data science. The only difference is they better make sure their portfolio projects are out there, their resume is cleaned up, that they actually have these real technical skills, and that they can show that they can actually do the work.
Hi there, guys. Welcome to the Richmond Alake Podcast. So this week, I'm having a conversation with Nick Singh. Nick Singh is one of the authors of Ace the Data Science Interview, a book that helps data scientists and machine learning practitioners prepare for interviews at top tech companies such as Netflix, Google, and Facebook. Nick himself has worked as a software engineering intern at Microsoft and Google, and he has also worked as a software engineer at the growth team at Facebook. So, my conversation with Nick really goes through what steps you can take to stand out when job seeking and trying to get into top tech companies. We also touch on what it takes to be successful within a data science career as well. I'm Richmond Alake, a machine learning practitioner exploring the humans behind AI and data, one person at a time. I hope you enjoy this conversation and come away a better practitioner. Hey there, Nick. Nice to have you on this podcast. I'm just going to jump straight into it and not ask any fluffy questions. Before we get into the good stuff, could you please give the audience, the listeners, a bit of your background and who you are?
Richmond, thanks for having me. I started loving math in high school, and then I started loving to code, and I was like, how do I combine these two passions? And that's kind of what brought me into the world of data and machine learning. But I've had like a kind of a weird path in and out of software. So I was a data engineering intern at Google. I was a software engineering intern at Microsoft. At Facebook, I was on their growth team, which is sort of a data-driven approach to growing the Facebook app. So there I got to combine software engineering with data. Then I worked at a data company, right? And this one, I was the head of marketing, a totally random, weird role because I wanted to see something different. And I wanted to learn the business side of things. So I worked at this data company that sold alternative data sets to hedge funds and real estate companies that help them understand where people go in the world through mobile location data. So there I sold location data and location-based insights to data science and machine learning teams at Fortune 500 companies. So I've seen data in a bunch of different ways, and I've just been loving it so far. And that's what brought me to write the book, Ace the Data Science Interview.
Nice. I will be talking about your book. Sure. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to unpack about your book. I guess we can start from what essentially took your career to a very high level, which is the internship you had at Google, or the internship you've been having. So I just want to touch on how valuable has the internship experiences you've had been to the development of your career. The reason why I'm asking this is there's always this consideration as to, should I go to an internship or should I just finish my university and just go straight into work? So how valuable was that?
It was huge. It was huge. So definitely I recommend folks who are still in school to be finding internships, even if they're part-time, even if it's small, even if it's just, for a few months. Highly recommend them. One, it helped me get this really great brand name on my resume, which paid dividends later on in my career. But also just as a practical aspect, what you learn in school isn't really the same as what you do day to day in a real job, right? And software engineering is one of those big places where it's like computer science is very different than software engineering on the job. Here we're doing runtime analysis and thinking about computer architecture, and the other, you're trying to just write clean code fast. And that's like a different skill than what we learn in computer science undergrad, for example. So internships have been huge, and I highly recommend folks to do them.
Yeah. Let me just talk about an hypothetical here. Let's say in an alternate universe, you didn't go for an internship. What would you do? What steps would you take to get to the place you are now?
Absolutely. So we live in an age where you don't need someone's permission to be doing data science, machine learning, and software engineering. You can do it from your home with an internet connection and a $300 laptop. That's about it. Because Kaggle is free. These are data sets out there that are free, right? Tutorials out there are free. So what I would do if I wasn't lucky enough to have these kind of internships, I would work on making portfolio projects where I actually can show future hiring managers that I can really do the job, right? So you can make a public Tableau dashboard for free today where you explore a data set and put it up there. You can build machine learning models and compete in Kaggle competitions. That's what I would spend my time doing if I wasn't able to find an internship.
Yeah. Honestly, I'll put my hands up and say I do not actually have an online portfolio. I need to make one. But I just want to say, is there anything you could do different to almost stand out? Because everyone's got a portfolio, everyone's doing Kaggle now, everyone's writing an article. We might not even have the right answer to this, but is there anything
Right.
to stand out?
So I love that you brought this up. You are saying everyone has it, but you yourself don't have a portfolio. You know what I mean? And you would think everybody else has a portfolio, but actually you're wrong, right? Because it's like you don't have a portfolio and a lot of people don't, right? And we know we should, but doesn't mean people are doing it, which is why, even though it seems obvious, this advice seems obvious, most people don't do it. I think it's like exercise. We all know we should exercise. Most people sort of exercise, but I'll be honest, like I don't I haven't been as active as I should have been, even though I know I should be. And we all kind of know that, but doesn't mean, most people probably don't exercise as much as they should, right? I think a portfolio project type stuff is the same way that we all kind of know we should be doing this, but the actual amount of people who see a project end to end. I mean, not like, just downloading some stuff and hacking around with it, but I mean, really put it together, work on it, put it on their GitHub, put a public notebook out there, link it on their resume to go through all those steps. Nah, that's far. They're not that many people who do that.
I watched from some of your interviews and you said a line that I just loved. And what you said was, if it doesn't have a link, it doesn't exist. Yes, you can do all this great work, but if you don't publicize the work, if there's no visibility there, then it might as well not exist. Like
Exactly.
no one's gonna know how good you are at this thing.
So people, what they think is they think it's a linear thing. I spend time on a project and the value to the world is linear. So if I spend 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, that's how much value I accrue. But the thing is, if it's not published, it's almost like it just spikes up the second you publish it. But no matter how much effort you put into something, if it's just not even out there, it doesn't matter whether you spend 10 hours or 50 hours. If it's just not out there, no one can see it. Who cares? It's basically useless, right? And again, that's why I'm saying so many people get wrapped up in their minds and get scared, like, I got to do a little bit more polishing before I put it out there. I got to do this or that, or I got to add this extra part or do this extra analysis. And once you start following the track, you realize, wow, there's a reason most people just don't publish their projects. And I think they should. I think even a half done project is good to do. But that's what I want to emphasize, is that because that value to the world is not linear, it's just sort of like it jumps the second you publish it. If it doesn't have a link, it doesn't exist. It's not valuable until it's actually out there for someone to see.
Okay. So I want to take a step back into education. Could you let us know what's your educational background is, and I could then dive into some questions in regards to that?
For sure. So I went to the University of Virginia and I studied systems engineering, which is kind of like industrial engineering or operations research at other universities. I also minored in computer science, but I took a bunch of computer science classes. I was trying to do a double major, but it didn't quite work out. So I was a few courses short. But honestly, in college, I mostly thought of myself as more of a CS software engineering person. I ended up being a systems engineer. But what's awesome is systems engineering is this mix of like business, applied math, modeling. I mean, that's a lot like data science, you know what I mean? And then the only part it was missing was more of a programming aspect, which is what I got in my CS minor. So combining the two, it set me up really well for this field.
Okay. So you've got essentially you've got a bachelor's degree then?
Yeah.
Nice. Is that the extent to your actual education?
Yep.
The reason why I'm asking that is when I look at the job requirements for machine learning roles, computer vision roles, you always see masters, PhDs. Do you need that masters? Do you need that PhD to actually get noticed?
I would say that you do need a master's or PhD if you're trying to do like computer vision research. And I mean, you're a computer vision engineer. So it was a really good return on investment for you. But let's be honest, in the world of data is huge. Not everyone's going to be a deep learning researcher, computer vision researcher doing some PhD level robotics work. For every one of those roles, there's a lot of roles for just business intelligence analyst or data analyst or even data scientist that doesn't necessarily need a master's or PhD. So I think that if you're trying to do a more research oriented role or something on the cutting edge, PhD could be good. A master's is definitely good. I think PhD, the ROI is still not really, you better love what you're doing if you want to get a PhD, right? Because that's like 4 or 5 years. And those years could be spent in industry with just a master's and then like actually getting on the job experience. So I don't know about PhD too much unless you're really trying to be a researcher, but masters can be helpful for some of these more advanced roles. But I just want to dispel the notion that you need a master's for data science, for example. There are plenty of people in the US with just an undergrad degree doing data science. The only difference is they better make sure their portfolio projects are out there, their resume is cleaned up, that they actually have these real technical skills, and that they can show that they can actually do the work. Then you're in good hands.
Yeah, and I think the main thing here is visibility and standing out. How can I separate myself from the crowd? Well, you are right. There are also entry-level data science position and data science position that do not require that much of an academic background up to the PhD level. Even just having the experiences, it really works well. So
Yep.
that's the education part. I want to talk about breaking into the data science industry. After you graduate and you're looking for a job, do you think it's easier to get a job now compared to 5 years ago?
It's tough to say. I wish I had some real data behind my answer, that would be fitting, but I don't. I think a few things have occurred. One is a lot more people are into data these days. So maybe the competition's increased, but on the flip side, a lot more companies have access to their data in a clean spot or have collected it and stored it in the cloud and are ready for it to be analyzed, right? So just as much as people have entered the market, a lot of companies have also grown their demand for data, right? So it's really hard to say what's outpacing what. I think that when people say that it's harder now because there's just too many people competing for the same jobs, I feel like that's a bit of a cope. People not really being true to themselves and saying, hey, am I actually a good candidate? Because there are a lot of people vying for jobs, but still, even things like putting out a portfolio project or really, something like, okay, you know what? Like after 2 years of a master's degree or, you finish your undergrad, you have like one solid big thing to point to that you spent more than 80 hours on by yourself. Honestly, most people don't have it. And you might be thinking, Nick, like 80 hours of work that I myself did, that's such a high bar. But I'm thinking like that's like 6 weekends. In your 4 years of undergrad or in your 2 years of master's, you couldn't find 6 weekends in a row, and these college kids, like we have winter break off. I don't know how they do in UK, but we get like from December 15th to January 15th off for winter holidays. You can find 80 hours in that time to go work on a project. That's just like one winter break,
True.
and that's only like 2 weeks of full-time work. So it's sort of like, hey, if you're going to spend a year or 2 or 4 years doing education, whether it's bachelor's or master's, and you can't find an extra 2 more full work weeks to do something on your own, blaming others and saying the industry is competitive is not that's coping. Like you got to look into yourself and be like, hey, can I get that project or 2 out? Because once you have those projects, and we'll talk about it with the cold email, you're just like off to the races, right? Because you've got some real work you've shown you can do. And hopefully that work's relevant to your dream company. And then you can go email them about it, or at least your dream industry. We'll talk about that soon.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that now. Let's talk about code emailing and well, it sort of ties into breaking into data science because it's one of the strategies where you could use to get a job. But you're very outspoken as to not going through job boards and actually use unconventional methods to actually reach to either employers.
Yep.
CEOs. Could you elaborate more on that? As in, what's been your experience and what can you give in terms of advice?
For sure. I'm a huge fan about sending cold emails, meaning sending emails to people you don't know. So much so that I put a whole chapter in the book. I think it's chapter 3 on cold emails. When you say using unconventional techniques, one funny thing, and this is just me nitpicking. Actually, in the sales and recruiting world, sending emails to people you don't know, that's not unconventional. That's the job. That's like salespeople reach out to people they don't know all day long. Recruiters send in-mails to folks all day long that they don't know. So it's almost like conventional in certain worlds, but most job seekers don't know that they can flip it around. If recruiters can send unsolicited email to you, you can send emails to recruiters. It's not that hard, right? So I'm a big fan of that, partly because with the proliferation of like job boards like Indeed and Monster and LinkedIn, you got a lot of folks applying for the same positions. And what's the barrier to entry? Well, you just have to drop your resume in there in like one click sometimes even. LinkedIn has like a one-click apply. Now, if you've got a PhD from a top school and a bunch of research and you've worked at FANG, fine, you're okay. But if you're like the rest of us who don't have that, applying in that same pool, you're going to get filtered out. No one's going to look at you because they have to look through 300. And if you just like don't fit the mold, just even slightly, they're not going to look at you. Now, if you send an email to that hiring manager, you send a DM to that hiring manager on LinkedIn or even on Twitter, it doesn't matter how you reach out to them. And you let them know like, hey, I'm not just spraying and praying. This is not just a random reach out. Hey, Richmond, I saw you're a computer vision engineer. I made a computer vision project using Keras that did blah, blah, blah. I'm really interested in your company because you're doing stuff in, let's say, healthcare. I want to work for you. Do you have any open positions on your team? You showed you actually know that they do computer vision. You showed that you had a project that was relevant. That's how you stand out and really get around this whole filtering mess where you just get filtered on keywords or based on the school you go to.
Then you mentioned that it's chapter 3 in your book, and damn, I gotta say, I read the first 4 chapters in your book, and I didn't think, I was just reading it just to get like a beat on you, just to get a bit of background. And in 4 chapters, I took about 8 key takeaways that actually.
Well, right.
And one of it was, I'm not going to say the name, but I actually use your cold email. You actually have examples of cold emails in the book that you've used. And I took the same structure and I use it to reach out to a prominent person within AI and machine learning, someone that everyone within the space knows. And I got a response back and I was like, damn, this actually works. Like,
yep.
it was so amazing. Something I just got out of a book, implemented it, couple hours, you get the result back. So guys, cold emailing works. And this book is just filled with so much gems that they seem obvious. And like you said, they're obvious to other people in other industry, but to technical folks like us, they're not that obvious. And you provide very good examples that people can just steal ineffectively.
Yeah.
You have your resume there and you have the code emails there. What else do you need?
Yeah, no, I want to touch on that. I think the reason there are these nuggets is because I'm a genius. No, just kidding. No, the reason there are these nuggets in there is because job hunting is like a full-time job.
Yeah.
So if you're like a normal person who needs to find a job, you're not thinking about how do I cold email like a salesperson or brand or do all this stuff. You're just trying to get a job. Right. And that's what's happened. Like I was able to have enough time to like really think about it and these different experiences through marketing and sales, just like my weird background as a DJ, even all of it's kind of culminated in having a little bit of a differentiated take towards job hunting, which I don't think any one piece is that revolutionary, but I think putting it all together for data folks, it might be the first time it's all really come together. So I'm glad you were able to pick up on some of these gems that you might not normally have known, but you got value out of.
What you're describing there, where you spoke about like your background and things you've worked and everything just tying up together and working and working together to give you this outcome. Have you read the book Skip the Line by James?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it talks about something just taking off the skills and just marrying all your backgrounds together and then just getting a good results later on. And I feel like that's with DJing. You've used that communication skills from DJing and interaction skills that you've been able to use to actually work in marketing, work in sales, and work in growth. And ideally, that is such a very good background and experience to have.
Yeah, it's been really fun. So that's why I've always told folks like do things that you find interesting and that are valuable to you and to the world,
Yeah.
and you'll be golden, right? Now, if you're doing things that you like but aren't very valuable to the world, it's going to be hard to put them together. But the world likes DJs, people like partying, people like people who can talk well, people who know data, and you're able to combine all these things, and you might have a weird career like talking about data science for a living, which is what I get to do now. And the thing is, I would consider myself to be lucky in that regard, but I think that there's a lot more people who can be intentional so that they can get lucky themselves, right? Because when you think about it, it's not really luck sometimes as more intentionally combining different valuable skills together, Um, one other framework, more mathematical framework to think about it is like our society values people who are really, really good at something. Why? Because with the internet, if you're the world's best at something, you can reach the world. Back in the day, 200 years ago, if you were a shoemaker or you're a butcher, you just had to serve your town. And if you were really good, who cared? You couldn't get your products out there into the world. Now, with global markets and global social media, if you're the world's best soccer player, you can play on the world stage. You're the best world's data scientist. You can work at the best company or innovate, And the point is, I don't think everyone can be the world's best data scientist or machine learning person, not even top 1%. But you could be the top 1% of machine learning folks who also love to podcast and are good at it. You can be the top 1% of machine learning folks who also know art and can make really good visualizations or can do some really cool things with AI generated art. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like when instead of trying to be 1% globally, if people could just try to be in the top 10% for 2 to 3 different skills that don't really normally go together, and put them together and find a way to make it work, you can really skip the line and have a really standout career.
Man, are you serious that you've not read the Skip the Line book? Because you're just bringing out gems from the book. Because James quotes, I forgot who he quotes in his book. This is James Altucher, and he's the author of Skip the Line. And he quotes someone in the book that basically says, "Don't be the best, be the only." So
Yes.
be the only person that does this thing, and that's basically what you just said. Really, really, it's such a valuable lesson to learn and to incorporate. So we can agree, okay, don't go to where everyone's going, such as the job boards, right? Or do that, but don't expect to get much from it. What other creative methods can a data scientist that is looking for a job today use to distribute their resume?
Right. So cold emails, cold DMs, Twitter outreach. I have seen some clever people send something in the mail, like our donuts or something. But I'll be honest, again, this is one of those things where I'm going to push back on your question and say, already so few people send cold emails, even though that the recipient's always in their inbox, right? Recruiters live in their email inbox. Hiring managers, busy execs, they're always in their email. Yet people still don't do it, right? So I'm going to push back and say, forget about trying to get even more creative. Just doing this one thing itself and sending 20 cold emails you'll be better than 95% of people on the job hunt. And I know that sounds like, what do you mean, Nick? Like you wrote about it in your book. Now everyone's going to be doing it. I'm telling you, no, it's still like, even though I tell people to do this, the number of people who actually pull it through and like write a good cold email to at least like 10 people, because you can't get anywhere with just one email, right? It's 10 people. It's a few people who will do it, but the ones who do it, they win. So I don't even have to get that creative with this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it just works. Like you told me, right? It just worked. You did it a few hours later and it worked.
I didn't do it for a job. I just did it to get some advice and some insight. And It was from someone that I thought would never respond. And it worked.
Yep.
That was what.
Yep.
So your book is amazing. And I'm only 4 chapters in. And I'll give you a chance to talk about the book. And also, I know you said a lot of people are not going to be using what you've written, but your book is a bestseller on Amazon. So a
Yep.
lot of people are reading this book. So a lot of people
Yeah.
are using you as wise. But can you tell us how the book is structured and what the book is generally about?
Yeah. No, a lot of people have loved the book and put it into action, but I always feel like still you would be surprised by how many people read it. They're like, yo, this is dope, and then just never do anything with it, right? So like the fact that you actually put that advice into action puts you already in the top like 20% of people, because so many people are going to be like, yo, this is sick, and just forget about it or just not do it, right? Because I can't make someone do something, like I can only get you so far. um no, the book's awesome. So I definitely want your audience to check it out. The first 4 chapters are more about how to approach the job hunt. So you talk about resumes, portfolio projects, cold emails, and then acing the behavioral interview, which is really about how do you tell your story. The back half of the book, the more meaty part, now that's the technical interview side. That's helping you to prepare for statistics questions, probability questions, machine learning questions, SQL and coding questions, and then finally these like product sense/case interviews, which are a little bit more holistic, a little bit more far reaching, that have you kind of synthesize a lot of different concepts into like one big question.
The content of the book is very good, and it's got a good balance with actual practical and just general knowledge, especially the machine learning bit as well. Is you don't go straight into the code or the questions. You actually give a good background into machine learning, statistics, probability. Um, One thing I want to ask, and this is just as a writer, it's how did you manage your time when you were writing this book? Can you talk to me about the time management and finding the time and what habits you build to actually write the book?
Richmond, I'm a freaking human, man. I wish I was one of those like people who woke up at like 5 a.m. and did my stuff. I'm not, right? And I think that's one of the things that people who read the book will realize is like I'm not like God's given gift, just making portfolio projects left and right, productivity maximization. No, nothing like that, man. I delayed the book like 11 times, you know, like it took forever to write the book, and it was a real pain. And I wish I had some secrets, but I don't. I think um, I ended up quitting my job to work on the book full time, because this is right when COVID was hitting. I moved back in with my parents, so I didn't have to pay rent anymore. And I was like, you know what? If I don't write the book now, when the world shut down, when I gave up my lease in San Francisco, there's no friends to hang out with, nothing to do. If I can't write the book that I've dreamt of right now, I'm never going to write the book. So that's kind of like what made me write the book. I think another big thing I have for people who are interested in writing, especially in writing a longer form thing like a book, would be to validate their content through putting it out there earlier into the world, such as through blog posts or YouTube videos. Basically, make sure that your ideas are resonating, right? So I have that cold email chapter in the book, but I first validated that by writing about cold emailing a lot on LinkedIn, and people really loved my advice. They loved my tips. And that's why I made it a chapter in the book, even though, you wouldn't think at first go, like, why would this whole chapter be in there in a book about data science interviews? But I put it in there because I got good feedback on it. So I think that's one way to just do this book writing project, is to like break it into chunks and see if people are liking what you do, which is really funny because that's basically the same thing for any software engineering product or any business idea, which is you don't just try to do the whole business idea in one go. You try to make it a really small chunk and see if people are vibing with it before you really try to expand it and like put it out there in its final form.
Exactly. You create an MVP and then
Perfect.
you iterate on it. So it's self-published, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. Is in your first book, and I'm sure there is more to come. I'm sure we'll probably see a second edition of this very soon.
Sooner or later. Yep.
Yeah. How are you not like you mentioned LinkedIn, and I saw you've got loads of followers and connections on LinkedIn. How are you not a top LinkedIn voice yet? Is it?
Yeah.
We need to get on my list.
I don't know, and I got to go talk to somebody about it. But definitely, folks who are listening, definitely follow, because I post about daily different things about data science and software engineering career advice to about 75,000 followers at this moment. But you know what? I don't do it for the outside thing, so it is what it is. I'll be a top voice or not. As long as people like what I put in out there, I'm happy.
You're also on Twitter as well. Just
Yeah, trying to grow that one. Trying to grow. Not. I just kind of ignored it. I don't know. I just ignored it. I think Yeah, it's different too.
It's a different space. I'm trying to navigate the two. I'm like, I don't get it. So I just learned how to do Threads recently. It's like, damn.
I've been a lurker for a long time, and I think it's a really good platform. But I think, yeah, it's just a different style. So, but I'll figure it out.
Are you looking into any other sort of platforms to share the content? You're looking into doing like YouTube, looking into doing like podcasting?
I think TikTok could be really fun. I think YouTube is awesome, but maybe a little saturated and just like a lot of time and effort. TikTok seems fun, and I'm a little young and I like to dance, and like keep it more casual, right? So I think LinkedIn, it's a really good counterbalance to the more professional LinkedIn is to have like a crazy TikTok. So I want to try TikTok a little bit.
You try YouTube Shorts as well.
Yep.
Well, nice. Is it okay? I want to talk about skill development, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're a published author, right? And you also write a lot of articles. How did you actually develop your ability to write? Because writing is a soft skill. You work within data science, machine learning, and it's very technical. So how do you develop that soft skill you actually needed to deliver this book?
Yeah, for sure. So fun fact, right? Like in university, I didn't take a single liberal arts class. Okay.
Yeah.
I just took all these engineering and math and statistics classes. So I'm not like one of those people who's like artsy and like always writing and had it be a goal. Like that was not even like a lifelong goal or anything like that. I think how I got into writing was one of the first tips is write what you know.
Yeah.
And I knew career advice and I loved giving people career advice. So for me, it wasn't so onerous to be like, God damn it, I have to write another essay about Parliament or this or that. No, I got to talk about how people can get better jobs or like my experience at Facebook. And that was easy for me to write because I knew it and people liked what I wrote. So I think it was one of those things where it's like at first, the best way to write to get good at writing is to write more. And the easiest way to write more is to write about what you know and what you like. Even if it's, not necessarily, if you're trying to be a better data science writer, but you love Pokemon, go write about that. It's okay because it'll transfer over, right? So I think that's probably one of the biggest tips is like it's not that complicated. You just have to write more and write what you know. Because biggest thing is people are just like, now I have to write something really complicated and they just never put out an article. Richard, you have no idea how many people have asked me, hey, Nick, how do you grow a blog? How do you grow a following? And there are other software engineers and technical people. And they ask me, are you using Medium or WordPress or Webflow or Substack or MailChimp? They ask me 19 technical questions. I give them all the details to be nice. And I never see a single article from them because the trick is it doesn't matter if it's a WordPress or Webflow or MailChimp or Substack or whatever you have. The trick is you had to go fucking write.
Actually do it.
And people just don't do it, right? And it's one of those things where it's like the same advice of like, maybe if you just send cold emails, you don't have to go more creative. Or if you just build a portfolio, you don't have to go more. This is one of those where it's like, you just got to write, man. You got to write and then share that writing out with other people. And I think that's the other part people miss is, maybe I'm being a little flippant and say, oh, you just write and it'll get magically better. No, you have to write and you have to put it out there and ask people like, hey, how do you like it? Whether it's your friends or your family or on Facebook, wherever it be. And that's the way you get better.
I see you've got a bunch of books in your background. In terms when you're writing this book, did you increase the amount of books you consumed?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I definitely looked at different books to help inspire my writing because I'll give you an example. Cracking the Coding Interview is a great book by Gail McDowell, which is like a staple in the software engineering interview cycle. I looked at her book to see how is it organized and like, what are some of the ways, like what helped her book be successful? Because she has a very successful book. Similarly, I looked at her Cracking the PM book. Another book I looked at was Case in Point, Another one, I looked at some more technical books too, like Practical Statistics for data scientists or Data Science for Business. I looked at a whole bunch of different books just to see how are people presenting the material. Just because I don't claim to have invented anything in my book. I just tried to bring it in a condensed way into one spot. But really, my book, like, you don't have to read my book. You could read like 19 other books, except you'd have to read all 19 of them to get what we try to put in 290 pages here.
Yeah. And even when reading the book, I didn't feel like I was reading something. It wasn't really very, how could I put this? It wasn't technical. It wasn't too, were you using big words? It was simple language. And they even jokes in it, as in putting out your mixtape and you're asking people to send any your mixtapes over to your email. And that is real. You can send your
Yeah.
mixtapes over to Nick. It puts the email.
And people have. I've had 5
Really?
people say, send me their music. Only 2 were hip hop, but some people did some like guitar work or rock work. And I was like, yo, this is awesome. I love that you're making music and you're in data. Like, I love that. Right. So, I just try to be authentic and real where I can.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. So it was a pretty fun book that to read. Can we get into the financials?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the money because data science, machine learning, and AI is lucrative whichever way you look at it. So when let me just ask, just to put it blatantly, what is the highest salary you've ever seen a data science or machine learning person earn? I'm asking because you have a wide range of, you've been exposed to so many companies.
Yeah. I think I know at Airbnb, it's called like a senior data scientist who's made like 450K a year with
Okay.
only about like 7 or 8 years of experience. So I think their age would have been like 29 or 30. So like about 450K. Software engineering salaries can really go up there, and data engineering can as well. So yeah, and I also know another data engineer at Facebook that probably makes like 550, 600K.
Okay.
So data science salaries aren't as crazy at the top end as software engineering or data engineering, but they are getting up there. Machine learning definitely pays a lot because that's almost like harder to hire than software engineering because you need to be like a software engineer and know data science. At Facebook, for sure, people with 5 years, people with 4 years of experience could be making 400K a year. So you could be basically like age 25, 26, 27, make like 400K US. Um, yeah, in your mid to late 20s.
Nice. As in the salary range is yeah, if you put in the work, you can definitely get promotions and get into the high brackets.
Yep,
But obviously for an entry level data scientist, someone that just coming into the field, what can I do to actually maximize the amount that I'm owed, that the amount that's open to? I want to get the most.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. So one thing is treat your job seriously, meaning so many people have a job and like they clock in like 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
Like go hard in your job, learn as much as you can. Second you stop learning, go switch your job, go get another job. And in this day and age, job isn't for a lifetime. You could work somewhere, especially in your first job, for just a year. I worked in my first job for a year and 2 months. You
Nice.
can definitely work for only a year and a half and switch your job, especially if you find your learning rate coming down. Second thing is, even if your job's boring or you're not learning much there, you got crazy amount of free time. And we have all this access to the world's best resources out there for free today, thanks to Coursera and EDX and Kaggle and all these different course providers. Like, what's scarce these days isn't the resources to learn, it's the desire to learn. That's what's scarce. And it's that work ethic, or it's that drive to actually do those things. So I think it's just be a learning machine in your first few years of your career, learn everything you can, say yes to the big projects, and focus on adding real business value is another thing. Like, as much as you're spending time on the technical stuff, think about how can I become a better writer, presenter, communicator? How can I learn more about the industry our business is in so that I can more effectively communicate with my business stakeholders or my product managers? That's really how you level up. Because as you get higher and higher, you solve bigger and bigger problems. Bigger and bigger problems means working with more and more people. Working with more and more people means you got to be able to talk to different kinds of people. And what that means is, if I have to work with, when you're like an entry level data scientist, software engineer, you just take whatever's given to you by the product manager. But when you climb up the ranks, you have to start making your own product decisions, or like working with your product manager or your business stakeholder. So as you climb up the ladder, you got to kind of know a little bit more about what product managers do, what my business stakeholders are looking for, what my end customers are looking for, so that you can kind of cross-functionally talk to everybody and lead these bigger projects, because that's how you really get those bigger paychecks. So I think that's one of those things that people can do early on, is to learn more technically, but also I think in sports it's called cross training. So you don't injure yourself from running. They tell you go swim or go bike, because those are different muscles, but they still build up your cardio. You know, what's the equivalent in data science? Like, go hard on data science and ML skills, but spend a little bit of time learning about product management or your domain. Like if you're in transportation or logistics, go learn supply chain. You know,
It's very relevant.
that's how you'll get superpowers.
Yes. Another question. Have you sent a cold email to Drake yet?
No, but that's a really good idea. I should. The funniest cold email I sent was, there's this Netflix show called Indian Matchmaking. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's this reality TV show of this matchmaker in India who sets up people on dates so that they can get married through arranged marriages. And it went super viral, like in India, but also across the Indian American community, or sorry, like the Indian expat community all across the world. So I sent an email to the matchmaker saying, like, can I be on the show? And like, she's like, yeah, I can fill out all these details. And I started filling them out. But then I was like, okay, this is getting a little too real, because so I like back. I was like, okay, I don't want to be on reality TV. Also, it's not like I would have been cast. You know, it's not obvious that I've been cast, but it was just like, oh wow, this Netflix TV person is responding to me, and I could be potentially on this dating show.
Do you have any other nuggets? Is it obviously you have them all in your book, but could you just give us like a sneak peek into nuggets
Sure.
you can incorporate to your resume?
Sure. So you bring up a good point, and for listeners at home, it's all about quantifying your achievements, right? So tell me how you improve precision or recall, or tell me about how many dollars you saved for the company, or how many dollars your model generated, you know, or tell me about the lift you got in click-through rates with your ad prediction model. You know, quantify it where you can. And here's the thing, you are actually in a spot that most people are. We do all this work, and it's like, you know, the metric, I don't really have a metric to quantify how effective my work was. And I'll be honest, a lot of people have been there. So the trick is, and this is the nugget, in your current job right now, think about what are the numbers for this upcoming project that you're working on. Almost think about the end result before you even start. Okay. Because that might actually change what the end result you want to have is. Okay. So at Amazon, I'll give you an example. At Amazon, they talk about this, where before they launch a product, they write up the press release for the product as if it was already done. Because they say, oh, we just launched a new Amazon Kindle reader that can store 7,000 books, like can do this, this, this. That's what tells people like, oh, wow, we're trying to brag about how many books the Kindle reader can store. I guess this go around, we should really work on optimizing storage, because that's what we're really trying to brag and win on, right? So it's a very different way to think about your project versus a PM telling you like, oh, I want this spec, versus, oh, the press release is all about how we have really good storage and battery life. I guess we should really focus on those things, you know? So thinking a little bit more about the future state and then working backwards is really helpful, right? So I think that many people who don't quantify things in their own projects, that's fine. Let's get it right on your next thesis project or your next work project. When you're tasked with something, ask them, think, is this going to grow dollars, or is it going to save dollars? Is it going to improve or reduce, is it going to reduce latency? And if so, what's that number before I even start my work?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that number before you start your work, how are you going to tell a future hiring manager that you actually made something improve, right? And then how are you going to tell your PM? How are you going to tell your boss? How are you going to get promoted without that number, right? So that's one of those first things, which is like, it's not even just about your, you know, trying to get a new job. It's just like, if you want to get promoted in your own job, you better have those numbers so that when it comes time for your performance reviews, you can go tell the boss man or the VP, like, hey, this is the before state, this is the after state, look at what I did, you know, and not try to do your project and then think, oh, what actually happened? Like, how do I actually improve it? I don't really know. We should have benchmarked it.
So you finished writing a book and you've been doing a lot of podcasts and a lot of talks about the book. Tell me, what's next? What's next for Nick? Where are you going?
Yeah, I think probably I want to film a video course because as I mentioned so much, like there's a difference between reading something and then actually watching me write a cold email or like coming up with a scenario and really walking people through the flow of how to write cold emails or fix up their resume or what are good portfolio projects or how do we actually solve these SQL interview questions or these machine learning questions. So I probably want to make a video course that really brings to life the concepts in the book because I know people learn differently. And I know the book's been really helpful for a lot of people, but I think a video course would just add an extra layer to really make these concepts sink into your brain.
I might as well just give a mention to your co-author, Kevin.
Yep.
How did you two meet?
We went to high school together. We're both from
Nice.
Northern Virginia, DC area. Yeah. And we kept in touch. Like we've been friends since high school. He went to the University of Pennsylvania for college, but we both had our first job at Facebook. Me as a software engineer on the growth team, him as a data scientist on Facebook groups. So that was where we, and we lived together. So we not just worked together, we also were roommates
Right.
in Palo Alto, California. And, while we were there, we're just like riffing on ideas and we're like, why hasn't anyone really written about data job hunting? Because there's a lot of stuff like leak code for software engineers. There's cracking the coding interview. Why does this not really exist for data folks? So that's kind of the genesis of how we started this book.
It's a very good collaboration and partnership. Really well.
Yeah.
I'm just before we round up this podcast, is there any sort of last nugget, anything you want to let us know, the listeners?
Yeah, I think my last message is just let people know that there's a lot of reasons you could justify why you're not maybe having the career you want. Like, oh, I don't have a master's or my work visa is this, or I studied economics, not computer science, or this is wrong. And I think just be honest with yourself and realize like, hey man, there's so many resources out there today that allow you to self-learn and self-teach yourself. So many books out there, so many courses. You really can change your life. You can really change your own fortune by focusing your time and like getting through these technical concepts, building projects and showing that off to people. Like this barrier, like, oh, I don't have a PhD. How am I going to do this or that? It really isn't as big as you think, right? Because as you yourself said with this whole cold email thing, like, oh, so someone I thought would never respond to me responded to me in a few hours. That's like think about how much your reality changed. This person will never respond to me. Went to, oh, you responded in a few hours. Wow. And now you realize you could do that to anybody. You know what I mean? And that's the same thing here where it's like, oh, people are always like, oh, I don't have this work visa. I don't have this. I don't have my correct educational thing. It's like, hey, if you can go take a course on anything in the world that's worth learning for free practically today, the only thing in the way is you. So if you can get yourself out of the way, the world's you can do anything.
That is a very good way to end the podcast. As in, thanks a lot for your time and for the nuggets you've shared. And I'm going to complete reading this book. It's so good. So I'm going to keep
I appreciate that, man. And thanks for having me on. This is a lot of fun to riff on.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening to this episode. Next week, we'll be speaking to Louis Tunstall, who is one of the authors of the book Natural Language Processing with Transformers. He's also a machine learning engineer at Hugging Face. In our conversation, we explore how Louis broke into the data science and machine learning field when coming from a research background. Again, thanks for listening and see you in the next episode.